Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at what happens when spiritual seeking, well, when it goes wrong. We're going to be examining cults and, in particular, the Science of Identity Foundation.
Right, and we're going to use cults and deteriorated spiritual systems. Also, we have this list of supposed cult members and some online discussions about the foundation to, really get a sense of how these groups evolve.
It's fascinating to me, like, how a group can start with these, like, really pure intentions, like seeking enlightenment or deeper meaning, you know, and then they become something potentially harmful.
Yeah, think of it like this. Genuine spiritual teachings are kind of like a flowing river, right? Constantly evolving and adapting. But with cults, these teachings, they become rigid, almost like that river freezing over.
So instead of like encouraging personal growth, they kind of create this system with all these strict rules and interpretations.
Exactly. And rituals, they often become the focus rather than the inner transformation that they're meant to facilitate. Like, take yoga, for example. It was originally designed for like a larger cosmic purpose, but a lot of groups today, they only emphasize the physical benefits.
So they miss the forest for the trees, right?
Yeah.
Focusing on the outward form rather than the deeper essence.
That's a great analogy. It's like, someone like meticulously cleaning their car every day, but never actually driving it anywhere.
I see what you mean. And have you ever felt like that in your own life? Like stuck in a routine or a practice without seeing like real progress? Maybe it's time to examine whether the form is overshadowing, the true intention.
Hmm. That's an excellent point to consider. And when it comes to these, groups that have kind of gone astray, there are some red flags to watch out for.
Yeah, and cults and deteriorated spiritual systems actually gives us like a whole list. And one that really struck me was the over-veneration of leaders. It's almost like they become worshipped.
Right. And that often goes hand in hand with hostility towards anyone outside the group. It creates this, us versus them mentality.
And another thing is like fragmentation. You start with one teaching, but then it kind of splinters into all these like subgroups with like conflicting interpretations.
Yeah, which creates confusion and division. It becomes less about genuine inner growth and more about just blindly following the rules of a particular faction.
There's this powerful quote from the source that really captures this. It says, they frequently use but a single method of interpretation of literature and tradition, training people and not enabling them to become illuminated.
It's a good one. It highlights how some groups can really stifle true spiritual development, essentially like, turning followers into clones instead of encouraging individual growth.
Okay, so let's apply these concepts to a specific case study. The Science of Identity Foundation. Now, things might get a little controversial here, so we want to be clear that we're, just reporting on the information from the sources we have.
Absolutely. We're not endorsing any particular viewpoint, just, providing you with the information to draw your own conclusions.
So this foundation was founded by Chris Butler, also known as Jagat Guru. And one of our sources is this website called Flashlight and Roaches, and they claim to have a list of 533 alleged cult members.
Okay. We can't verify the accuracy of that list, but it does raise some questions, especially when you see names like Tulsi Gabbard and her family on there.
Tulsi Gabbard, the former U.S. representative and presidential candidate. I remember reading about her involvement with the group.
Right, and there are records of her and her family members contributing to her political campaigns. It really makes you wonder about the level of influence this group might have.
And then there's Joseph Bismarck, also known as Jaffa Das. He's got connections to QNet, a controversial multi-level marketing company.
And that's a common thread we see with some of these groups, the use of, business ventures as a way to generate income and control members.
So if we connect this back to those warning signs we discussed earlier, the over-veneration of the leader, the potential for financial exploitation, do you see any parallels with the Science of Identity Foundation?
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the psychological manipulation that often comes into play. Techniques like love bombing, where potential recruits are showered with attention and affection to make them feel special.
So they feel like they finally found a place where they belong. But then what happens?
Once they're hooked, the isolation begins. They're, discouraged from having contact with friends and family outside the group, further solidifying their dependence on the leader and the community.
It's a very subtle yet powerful form of control.
Indeed. And this is where, those Polish forum discussions about the Science of Identity Foundation become particularly illuminating.
Because they offer like firsthand accounts from people who've actually been involved with the group.
Exactly. And some of these stories are they're quite disturbing. They shed light on the, potential for harm, the psychological pressure and manipulation that some individuals experienced.
Like the story of Kejia, the young woman who joined the group and later she died by suicide. It's a tragic reminder of the devastating impact these groups can have.
And it's not just emotional manipulation. There are allegations of financial exploitation and abuse within the group as well.
One quote from the forum that really stood out to me was,
Well, one former member described, being pressured to work these long hours for the organization, like with very minimal compensation, and even resorting to selling goods at markets just to make ends meet.
"Oh wow, that's troubling." It really makes you like question the ethics of this whole thing. You know.
Yeah, it certainly raises concerns about, potential exploitation and where those generous donations are actually going.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears for a moment and look at the psychology of the guru trauma, abuse, and cults. It offers some insights into the mindset of these leaders.
Yeah, it paints a fairly unsettling picture. Often they exhibit traits like narcissism, an excessive need for control, and even delusions of omnipotence.
So they really believe they're like above the rules, almost like a godlike figure.
Right, and what's interesting is the role that past trauma can play in shaping a leader's behavior. Like their own wounds can drive them to seek power and control over others.
So it becomes like a cycle of pain almost.
It's a complex dynamic for sure, and we can see some of these patterns in the allegations against Chris Butler specifically from the articles by Jasper Leonard on Medium.
Leonard, he doesn't hold back, does he? He presents Butler as like this manipulative and controlling figure.
He certainly paints a stark picture. One quote that resonated with me was, "He is just another feeble and fallible man who is more than capable of harming others. He is not a saint among saints. A saintly person wouldn't be a bully."
Whoa, strong words.
Yeah.
And it speaks to this idea that the guru often creates this like persona, this larger than life image, to inspire awe and devotion in their followers.
Right, and that makes it even harder for followers to question their authority or recognize potential abuse. It's all part of the manipulation.
And Leonard also points out this curious contradiction in Butler's alleged behavior, right?
Yeah, he highlights Butler's obsession with cleanliness, like avoiding germs. Yet, metaphorically speaking, Leonard argues that Butler is the most toxic element in his followers' lives.
That's fascinating. It ties back to this whole like image versus reality thing we were talking about before.
Exactly. And speaking of reality, those Polish forum discussions, they provide a glimpse into the lived experiences of individuals involved with the Science of Identity Foundation. Those firsthand accounts, they really bring these issues to light.
You mentioned earlier that one quote really stood out to you. What was it about?
It was from a former member, and they claimed that they were pressured to, cut ties with their family and to prioritize the group above all else. It's just a heartbreaking illustration of the isolation and manipulation we've been discussing.
And then there's the story of Cassia, which really underscores the tragic consequences that can occur within these groups.
Yeah, in her final message to her family, Cassia stated, "I'm happy because I think I have found my place in life." And this was just a few months before she took her own life. It's incredibly sad and makes you wonder, what led her to that point.
Yeah, it's a chilling reminder of the potential for harm and the importance of recognizing the warning signs.
Right. Understanding the manipulation tactics and the psychology behind these groups, that's essential for protecting ourselves and others.
So with all this information in mind, like what can someone do if they find themselves in a situation like this? How do they break free?
Well, that's where trauma, abuse, and cults, it offers some guidance. The first step is recognizing and understanding the manipulation. It's crucial to realize that it's not their fault and that they've been subjected to a system that's designed to control and exploit them.
And then what?
Well, processing the trauma and loss is essential. Leaving a cult, it's a significant loss. It involves the loss of a community, a belief system, and even an identity.
It's a massive upheaval. So where do they go from there? How do they rebuild their lives?
Yeah. Well, therapy and support networks are crucial. Connecting with others who understand what they've been through, it's invaluable. Rebuilding trust and forming, authentic connections outside the group, it's a vital part of the healing process.
I imagine there's a lot of shame and guilt that comes with, you know, leaving a group like this.
Absolutely. And there can also be fear of retaliation or being ostracized. It's a difficult journey, but recovery is possible. There are resources available and people who care.
It's important to remember that there is hope for healing, and that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Well said. So we've examined the life cycle of these spiritual groups from, their initial purity to their potential deterioration, and we've used the Science of Identity Foundation as a case study to understand these complex dynamics.
Yeah, we've delved into the warning signs, explored the personal accounts, and analyzed the psychology of the guru. But as we wrap up, I'm left with a question.
Was that
Can any system, like even one that starts with like really good intentions, can it become corrupted over time? I mean, we've seen this with like religious institutions, political movements, even corporations. So what makes like spiritual groups particularly vulnerable to this kind of deterioration?
that's a really thought-provoking question. I think
Wow.
one factor is, the nature of spiritual seeking itself. People are often searching for, answers to life's big questions like meaning, purpose, connection,
Mm.
and that vulnerability can be exploited.
So it's like they're seeking something so deeply that they might like overlook red flags or even rationalize like questionable behavior.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of authority. In many spiritual traditions, there's this hierarchy, a guru or teacher who's seen as having, the special knowledge or insight.
Which can be a slippery slope if that authority isn't
Yeah.
like, balanced with accountability and critical thinking.
Absolutely. And remember how we discussed the crystallization of teachings. Well, that principle of fragmentation and simplification, it applies to entire systems as well.
What do you mean by that?
Well, authentic spiritual paths, they're usually, complex and multi-layered. They offer, deeper levels of understanding as the student progresses. But cults, they often oversimplify things, presenting a single formula or approach as the ultimate solution.
So instead of encouraging a nuanced and individual journey, they create like a one-size-fits-all dogma.
Precisely. And that's where the danger lies. It limits growth, it fosters blind faith, and ultimately it prevents people from reaching their full potential.
And this fragmentation often extends to like the community itself, right? We saw that with the Science and Identity Foundation and those Polish forum discussions.
Yeah, the group splintered into, various factions, each with their own interpretation of the teachings, leading to, infighting and confusion. And that fragmentation actually reinforces the guru's power.
Because they become the sole arbiter of truth, the only one who can interpret the teachings correctly.
Exactly. It,
Yeah.
it creates this dangerous dependency, making it even harder for people to, question or leave.
So what's the antidote to all of this? How do we protect ourselves and others from falling into these traps?
Awareness is key. We need to, educate ourselves about the warning signs of cultic behavior.
Yeah.
Be critical consumers of spiritual teachings, and be wary of any group or leader that demands absolute obedience or isolates its members from the outside world.
And I imagine trusting our intuition is crucial too, right? Like if something feels off, if it doesn't align with our values, then it's probably best to walk away.
Absolutely. No matter how charismatic the leader or how tempting the promises, your well-being and autonomy should always come first.
So as we conclude this deep dive into the world of cults and spiritual teachings gone awry, I think that the takeaway is this: genuine spiritual seeking should empower, not enslave. It should encourage critical thinking, not blind faith.
You beautifully said. And remember, true spirituality it's an individual journey. It's about connecting with your own inner wisdom, not blindly following someone else's dictates.
So to all our deep divers out there, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep seeking truth. But most importantly, trust yourselves.
And may your journey be filled with, authenticity, wisdom, and true liberation.